In this module of the course, we now get to the heart of the course. What exactly is dream interpretation? Who is qualified to do it? And when do you actually need it? So, in this first lesson, we are going to look at who is qualified to interpret dreams. Dream interpretation, as we had mentioned, is something that is highly speculative. It's something that's based primarily on tuition and being gifted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the interpretation given to it can affect how it comes to pass. So it's very important that you don't go to just anybody to interpret your dreams. It's also important that we know our own limits and we don't go around interpreting people's dreams. And with that, there's a reminder that this is not a course in training you in how to interpret dreams. It's just a summary of what we know about this field. At the end of the day, only those whom Allah gives this gift to are actually capable of interpreting dreams. But how do you find such a person? So, for example, you may have a dream that seems really strange to you, and your heart tells you, I need to seek out the interpretation of this dream. Who exactly do you go to for dream interpretation? It is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in almost every time and place there is some righteous person who has this gift. This is the way the world works. That if somebody has a dream that requires interpretation, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them access to someone who can interpret their dreams. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will facilitate the way. Just like he put Yusuf alayhi salam in that prison so that the prisoners and the king had access to someone who could interpret their dreams. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put such a person in your life if you actually require the interpretation of your dreams. But how do you know that this is the right person? There are a few qualities that you need to look at when going for dream interpretation. Number one, of course, is that the interpreter of the dream has to be a Muslim, a proper Muslim, not someone who is on a innovated belief or someone who is following a false prophet, but an actual Muslim following the pure teachings of Islam, right? So a real Muslim. With that, they need to have knowledge of the religion. In general, dream interpretation has always been linked to knowledge, specifically knowledge of the Quran and tafsir and the metaphors of the Quran, because a lot of dream interpretation is based on interpreting metaphors, and a lot of the interpretation of metaphors are based on the metaphors in the Quran, right? Along with that, knowledge of the hadith. As we saw, there are many ahadith on dream interpretation. Someone who is familiar with and knowledgeable of these ahadith will be more suited and suitable to interpreting dreams. So a Muslim who is a scholar of Islam, and number three, somebody who is pious. And we extract this principle from the verse in Surah Yusuf, where the prisoners go to Yusuf alayhi salam and they tell him their dreams. And they said, interpret it for us, we see you amongst the righteous. Meaning, they went to him for dream interpretation because he was a righteous man. So you want to take your dreams to someone who is a Muslim, a scholar, and a righteous person. And number four, is that they are generally known to the community as somebody who is gifted with the interpretation of dreams. This isn't something you study from a teacher, right? Any other Islamic field, you can study it from a teacher and get qualifications in it, including ruqya. You can study ruqya with a teacher and become a qualified raqi. But dream interpretation, this is something that Allah gives it to whom He wills. And if there is anyone who has a dream that requires interpretation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will facilitate for them in some way to meet someone who has this gift. But you need to ensure that the person that you are seeking dream interpretation from is someone who is righteous, someone who is scholarly, someone who is a Muslim, and someone who has your best interests at heart. You're not supposed to tell your dreams to people who dislike you and wish evil for you, as they may then interpret it in a way that is negative, and this may affect your mind and this may affect your life. So again, the few qualities to look for in someone to interpret your dreams. A Muslim who is righteous and scholarly and gifted at dream interpretation and has no ill feelings towards you, find these five qualities in a person, and inshallah, that's the right person to go to for the interpretation of your dreams.